No, I did.
Good evening. I'm calling this Newington Board of Education meeting to order. The time now is 7:00 p.m. It is Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. Would you please rise as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I think it is, yeah.
Okay, if the clerk would please call our roll.
Michael Branda,
Here.
Danielle Drove. Here. Dr. Bruce Fletcher,
Here.
Beth Mankey Wagner,
Here.
Richard Leverrier. Richard Leverrier. Amy Parati. Sam Sharma.
Here.
Jessica Weaver.
Here.
Anastasia Yap.
Here.
I have everyone here except Mr. Leverrier and Ms. Parati.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next thing we'll do, we'll move on to agenda item B, which is our presentation of awards and proclamations. And tonight we have an Everyday Hero Award. And this award is going to be presented to Sylvia Ribeiro, the world language teacher at Newington High School.
She's right over here.
She's here. Okay.
Come on up and her.
So in recognition of your positive impact on students and staff, and for going above and beyond and working equity into everything you do, and for connecting with the students of different cultures, it is my pleasure to present you this award. Say anything?
Just thank you.
A language teacher
Yes.
lost for words.
Yes, I love the word. Yes, I am. Merci beaucoup. And Sylvia, what I'm going to do is
Bienvenue.
read what was, if I could read the actual narrative of what
Oh,
was
yes.
said about her. And her nominator is Ashley Klopfer, who's also a teacher at Newington High School in our science department. She is. She's right over. Come on up, Ashley. So I have the privilege of co-advising NHS Student Council with Sylvia, and I am so amazed at how she works equity into everything she does. Not only does she advise StuCo, but she also has started a French club and a Portuguese club at school at the request of students who felt underrepresented. She works to get to know students of different cultures in her classroom and has built a classroom community that moves outside of her classroom walls. She encourages her colleagues to learn about their students and their cultures, and she encourages students to be themselves. It might seem small, but when you hear students speak of Ms. Ribeiro, they light up and always say they feel like they can truly be themselves and are accepted in her classroom. So that is the full report. Well, shake your hand. Thank you for everything that you do. You're welcome. So I don't know if you want to open it up.
Yep, I'm going to do that. All right. I'm going to open it up now for any board comments. If we want to just go around the table.
So that's
All right, so I just want to say, as I hear that, and I think it's wonderful that you were nominated, but what strikes me the most, she took it down, was the part about how students feel they can be themselves in your classroom. And so as a parent and a board member and a taxpayer, that is the number one thing, right? We want to teach our craft, but what we teach is we teach our children, right? That you don't teach French, you don't teach Spanish, you teach children. So that is a huge a testament to who you are and why you probably got this award. So thank you.
Thank you. I also want to speak on behalf of every teacher. I feel like, we're teaching our content, but we're also teaching, we're also, having students be welcome, feel welcome in our class. And I think that's the number one thing, creating connections. And, I speak on behalf of all the teachers, not just me. That's what we do. We don't know we do it. We just push so naturally that, that's why I was so surprised at that, because I feel like we all do it. And I see it every day in Newington High School and others too. So, yes, thank you.
All right.
Just want to echo this. And I think what's great is when we have the nominator here with it, because it just shows the true camaraderie that we see amongst our staff. And we want to make sure that we're still cultivating that. And as a former Stuco student and Stuco president, literally, I think my mom was just like so annoyed with me every time. I was like, Mom, Stuco is life. It's life. But because of our advisors, really being able to have really supportive staff, I know makes a huge difference. It made a huge difference for me. And I know those students that come, we have our student council representatives at our board table, and it's just wonderful. They are always beaming and they're always great representatives. So thank you for cultivating their talent and for being a great teacher, not only in student council. So I know that's not even your day job too. So doing all the advising and the outside extracurriculars is really great to hear that we're doing the above and beyond on the everyday. So truly an everyday hero. Thank you.
I think Danielle said what actually stood out to me, so I'm glad that we're on the same page there, and it's a good thing you went first there. But the other thing that stood out to me was just the fact that students who felt underrepresented could come to you and that you stepped up and did something for them. And I think that speaks so highly of not only yourself, but, kind of like what you said just earlier, just all the teachers in that building, just doing whatever they can for every student to feel like they are represented, and that the staff in this district and people at this table are here for them to be themselves and to be represented. So I think the work that you do makes you an everyday hero. And I think everything that you do above and beyond just kind of puts that stamp on it and makes it official. So thank you so much.
Just ditto to everything because everyone said it so eloquently. But I did want to just note one thing that I loved is that students came to you, they felt underrepresented, and they wanted clubs or activities or things to be formed and you to advise them. And I think that's really powerful that students knew this is a teacher we can go to and she'll take action and she will make it happen. And I know that it's not always outside of the teaching hours to give your time, but it seems like from what was said about you, it is truly your passion, and giving that time is something that you love and enjoy as many hours as it is. It's just truly an act of love. So thank you for all you do. You are, you make Newington proud. So thank you.
Thank you. Anastasia Yop.
Hi, how are you? Yes, I just have to echo what everyone else said. Thank you for, everything you do and, going above and beyond to help students. Clearly it shows, based on, your recommendation and just all the positive things I've heard also from other students. Just to read the line that it says, it might seem small, but when you hear students speak of Miss Ribeiro, they light up. And just to know that you have that positive impact in their life, and especially with all the stressful times and different things that go on, and you can be that light like during their day, I think that's amazing. So thank you very much for all you do, and NPS is very happy to have you. Thank you.
All right, Sam Sharma.
Hey, I'm just going to echo what everyone else said. So thank you for going above and beyond, and what you've done is really inspiring. So thank you again.
Okay, and I don't know if you noticed the note, Richard Leverrier was online. Okay. Very good. All right. So now we're going to be moving on to agenda item C. This is public participation on any matter related to board responsibilities. We do limit civil participation to 3 minutes, and it is our policy not to respond to public comments after they are made, and we will go back and we'll get answers to people if they have questions at an appropriate time. So if you want to participate and you are online, just raise your hand in the Google Meet. If you are here in person, we welcome you to come to the end of the table and state your name and the street that you live on, and then we will give you your 3 minutes. To the end of the table, yep.
So I've never done this before, so like try to turn on the mic, so it's green, so everybody online can hear you, and then it'll turn green. Just
I just wanted to start. It's a really, really nice segue that you guys were talking about, inclusion and participation and wonderful teachers, except that I'm having a different experience in John Wallace. I had emailed the board with concern about pretty strong anti-Semitic.
Excuse me, you need to state your name and your
Oh,
address.
gosh, I'm so sorry.
Thank
Shauna
you.
Voren, and I live on 204 Beacon Street. My son goes to John Wallace.
Thank you.
Dr. Brummett's familiar with me. Her and I have met several times. In the beginning of this year, I had addressed numerous times both the school and Dr. Brummett on the anti-Semitic incidents that my son has been encountering. I had made a few suggestions on how to fix the issue, many lessons, Holocaust remembrance, mention, anything, to which she nodded the head and everybody agreed with me, but nothing has been done. We're currently in March. I started this journey actually at the end of last year when I had suggested to Mr. Diaz that something should be done to mention, since my son is a minority in school, considered there's not many Jewish kids. I'm personally am an immigrant. I was born in the Soviet Union. I was raised in Israel, so I feel very passionate about it. We're raised in a multicultural, multilingual house, and nothing has been getting done. What has been done is just promises to me that things are happening. Nothing happens. When things do happen, somehow they're being investigated, and we come back to the same thing of what is being done. Dr. Brummett told me that there's going to be many lessons. I'm still to see any of those mini lessons. Even on Holocaust Remembrance Day this year, I specifically asked, maybe we should mention this to the student body just to know what anti-Semitism is. Kids don't know. Hate is not inherent. Hate is taught. And if these kids are not taught as a student body, they don't know. So now we have a bunch of 8th graders who are going into high school still uninformed on what it means to be anti-Semitic. It's making my son uncomfortable. It's making me uncomfortable. There's been empty promises nonstop, and I am here just to ask for help and to let me know, please, what is being done. I'm seeing nothing. And we just had a recent incident. Somebody has even went as far as to draw a swastika to give my son a piece of paper with swastika on it. My son's been talked about his features, how effed up, excuse my French, his nose looks, to say the least. And again, nothing is being done. I would like to know how we're going to address it, what is happening, because I'm just about my wit's end at this point. Because I know for a fact, if this was something different, had to do with race or gender, this would have been addressed very early and quickly. Like I said, we're at the end of the year, and I don't know if you want to sweep this under the rug and hope I go away, but I'm not going away. This is here, and it's here to stay. So here I am asking the question.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming and asking a question, and we will confer, and we will get you a response very soon.
I certainly hope so.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to come and speak?
For like 3 minutes. I got a lot written down, so. Mark Cooney, 204 Beacon Street. Where to start here? I echo the sentiments. I was not raised in a Jewish household, so I don't know I know what anti-Semitism is, but I've never experienced it. I could tell you in the mornings when you see a child crying because he doesn't want to go to school because something's going to be said, something needs to be done. So I hope that you guys take that matter seriously. We did meet a couple times with the superintendent, and we did bring this up. And so far, we've seen absolutely nothing done. We were hoping that'd be addressed. We spoke about advisory councils was brought up, and this was over a month ago. I'm not going off the sheet because you guys can only give me 3 minutes. I apologize. Basically, the only thing that came from it was an option of the books for the children to read. In the beginning of the year, basically our whole thing started at the dinner table when a 13-year-old came home asking, "What's a hussy, a tramp, a crack whore, tits flapping around, and a Milano baby?" After a few days of questions on this certain book that he was reading in the school, we asked Mr. Diaz if we could meet with him. Mr. Diaz and Ms. Whelan were at the meeting. Mr. Diaz was kind enough to let us know don't worry, our child would read books from straight white men next year. Okay? I don't know why he brought up race, but as a gentleman, I bit my tongue. After a few more conversations regarding the certain book that they were reading at school, teenage pregnancy, drug use, underage drinking, Mr. Diaz let us know, again, don't worry, next year he'll read books by straight white men. We informed Mr. Diaz that the book that we were discussing, the book in question was actually a memoir written by a straight white man. And after that, he directed us to Dr. Brummett. And this is actually our meeting with the superintendent, very cordial. She agreed that 13 years old was too young for this book that they were reading in class. At that meeting, we also brought up some of the anti-Semitic comments that have been made and asked if she could have it addressed in school. We even discussed how it'd be perfect timing, seeing that the whole Kanye West tweet, which I know everybody knows about, and the Kyrie Irving tweet were still fresh in everybody's mind. She said to be addressed, not to worry about it. We also mentioned how children will, I'll skip that part. Basically, the only thing that came from that when we went in to discuss the book was a book of things for the children to read. Basically, nothing happened on the anti-Semitic and the rhetoric increased. So we requested the other meeting last month. Basically, I already covered that part, but nothing is being done about any of this anti-Semitism that's going on in the school. Happens once, okay, happens twice. I mean, we're up to 4 or 5 times now. So I would just like someone on the board to take this seriously, take a look into it and hold people accountable. And that's all.
All right. Well, thank you very much for participating. Anyone else from the public? All right, I don't see anyone else. There are no hands raised online. I'm now moving us on to agenda item D, which is our consent agenda. And you should have received a packet with all of the minutes related to these 10 different meetings. So we have a slew of them here. So what I would be willing to do is entertain a motion. If there are no questions or changes that need to be made, I'll entertain a motion for all 10 of them to be approved.
Do you want to make the motion?
That's your.
Oh my God.
It does that.
Oh,
Not sure why, but.
It does.
All right, I will read it then. Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Branda. Any discussion? Simply, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. None opposed? Okay. So the consent agenda has been moved forward. Now we're going to move to agenda item E, Superintendent's of Schools Report, the equity update on Elizabeth Green School. Dr. Brummett.
Going to ask Mr. Marciano to come to the podium or to the end of the table, and I will project your slides for you.
Fantastic.
And all you have to do is tell me when to advance.
Excellent.
All right, let me get.
I can see them.
All right. Go.
Oh, just good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Marciano, principal of Elizabeth Green. This is my 9th year working at Elizabeth Green and being a part of this fine community. And I'd be remiss not to start by just saying how appreciative I am. 1, to be employed by Newington Public Schools, but 2, to be a part of the community at Elizabeth Green. The staff, the students, and the families have been outstanding the entire time I've been there. And I am so proud to be the leader of that school and the people that work in that school and the families that attend that school are just amazing individuals and really create a really good school environment for our students and our community. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about a small slice of our equity work. We're focused really on inclusive practices at Elizabeth Green. And so this work got started with us in terms of thinking a lot about how do we best serve our students with disabilities? And we have lots of questions there that we were, batting around and thinking about. And it's not important for me to read them. It's more to think about how do we best serve our students with disabilities in the classroom in the most efficient way with the most qualified staff. And so those were some questions that were coming up. And we have been on a journey to try and answer those questions as part of the work that we've been doing. Next slide. So back, I want to say in around 2017, we were fortunate enough to attend a training. It was a Stetson training that our special education leadership had put on, various members of different schools had participated in it. And they talked a lot about inclusive schools, how to best manage your staff, how do you what's the best instruction within the classroom environment to support the acceleration needed for our students with disabilities, and then collaborative teaching. So that was a training that occurred in 2017. Obviously, I think 2017, don't quote me on the exact date, but it was around there. And 6 years later, we are in a position now where we've been able to manage some of those things. And I'll kind of go through the history of where we were at and how that came out. So next slide. So we had this idea when we first started, we had, when we were in 2017, I'll say around there, we had two case managers with caseloads of 20 plus students, most with obviously academic and behavioral needs. A lot of our paraprofessionals were pushing into classrooms, supporting in classrooms, and providing most of the in-class academic and behavioral support to our identified students. And our case managers would go from grade to grade, class to class, to provide specialized instruction in deficit areas based on their IEP goals and objectives. And at that time, we only had a school psychologist providing all of this social emotional learning and behavioral support. When we had that initial training, it sounded great, but we didn't really have a structure for managing that. Next slide. So in thinking about this concept or this idea of creating a co-teaching environment where two or more educators, right now it's two educators, a classroom teacher and a case manager, working, co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing together within a classroom with a diverse group of students, right? Finding a way to do that with the system we had and a way to manage it wasn't possible. So some things have occurred over time, both with board support and some staffing changes happened, and some inquiry from some of my staff wanting to make a difference. So next slide. So a couple of things occurred. We added a case manager, which allowed our caseloads to go down by five, which made it more manageable. We have a social worker who also can help out with the SEL and behavioral components. We've also brought on a BCBA that's shared between two of our schools. And we also have a staff member, a registered behavior technician within our school. We transitioned from having our case managers providing all of the specialized instruction to including our interventionists in this. Our interventionists take a big load of the students and support them, provide the instruction in reading and or math. We had to create a very intensive schedule, and I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like in order for this model to work, because I have multiple teachers working. I have two teachers working in two grades, and they have to align with the times that they're working. And then our intervention team, we have created an intervention team that really monitors the performance of our students as a whole. Anyone that's at risk or some risk, we're taking a close look at and seeing if we're providing the appropriate services to those students. And then as a big factor and a big part of our work, specifically this year and part of last year, has been really increasing our cultural awareness, cultural responsive pedagogy understanding as a driver of this work, because that is a main factor in our success. Next slide, please. So So the journey began 2 years ago. One of my fourth grade teachers made a request. She had attended some training. She'd been finishing up a degree that she was getting. And she said, you know, she was really interested in the special education aspect and helping regular ed teachers become more informed about the inner workings of an IEP and those things. And she took it upon herself. And she had brought up this idea of co-teaching with me. And that was really the seed that started it. And she had asked to attend some training. And I had knew in the back of my head when we'd done this work previously, that we had some connections at CERC, the Special Education Resource Center. We'd made some connections with our coach. Her name's Michelle LeBrun Griffin, and so I had reached out to Ms. Golioso, our special education director, and kind of asked, can we make this work? And she did. And so we started 2 years ago. The trainer from CERC, Ms. LeBrun Griffin, came in, provided some summer professional learning, got us started on what co-teaching is and how it could be implemented in the classroom. And then from there, we've been doing monthly on-site coaching. So she'll come in, she'll do an observation, she'll provide feedback in terms of how it's going. And teachers can ask questions and navigate any intricacies of what they're coming across. A big part of this is scheduling, and like I said, I'm going to show you a little bit of that. How do I make time for them to co-plan? Those were questions I had to answer as part of this. And then this year, we were able to expand. So that same process repeated again. Now we have four co-taught classrooms, one in grade 1, one in grade 2, one in grade 3, and one in grade 4. And so we have a lot of moving parts going. And then a lot of our focus this year has really been on, again, building the tenets of culturally responsive pedagogy. So all of those pieces together help support the growth of our students. Next slide. So just a little bit about the co-teaching approaches. I think essentially our goal with this is to provide opportunities for our teachers to break up our students in different ways. It's much easier and much more engaging for the students that work in smaller groups. So a lot of the time our teachers are engaged in something called parallel teaching, where our co-teachers are working in opposite ends of the room, but doing a very similar lesson, maybe in different ways with different supports. And each of those approaches has a purpose and use within the co-taught classroom. And it really is driven by the student needs. So in order for them to implement these, they're co-planning, they're thinking about, well, what's going to be the best way for all of our students to be successful? And the impact on students we'll talk about in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So what we had to do to get there, this is just a snapshot of the 40 or so students, or I think it was closer to 50, of identifying all of the services the students need, and then how much time throughout the day based on their IEPs. It was quite a comprehensive process that we went through and tried to identify who's best suited for the co-taught classrooms. And you can see there's, different levels of how we were kind of labeling that. But it was an intensive process. Every member of the members of our case management team, our school psychologist, our social worker, and our speech and language path all kind of contributed their parts to this, which allowed us to formulate the groupings of the students. Next slide. Next was developing a building schedule that supported it, which is always an interesting and fun endeavor. But you can see the most important thing that I needed to do was make sure that there was no overlap between the instructional blocks for reading and math. And because those are the two subject areas that we have the co-taught classroom or the co-taught experience going on. And then also provide opportunities for extension. We have a half-hour block where we provide that specialized instruction. So that was quite interesting. So you can see here's the example of how it looks in actual action. These are the two case managers, and then the classrooms that they are working in at any given time throughout the day. Their day is quite busy. They do get a lot of steps in from one class to the next. Just the way the building is structured. But it is a masterpiece. I will take credit for it if I could a little bit, because it's not an easy thing to put together, to get all of these classrooms working together, or to make it in such a way where there's a little bit of time in between each class, so that the case manager doesn't have to run from one to the next, although she literally does. Next slide. So I'll tell you, I wanted to give you some data because I'm a data guy. I like to share some of it. And one of the things that I look for as an indicator of success is the general number of students in each of these classes moving from the at-risk, some risk range to the not at risk range anymore. And this is data that was collected over the fall and the winter this year. And you could see larger numbers greater number, smaller, how am I going to say this? You can see larger number increases in our, no, that's not, there is less students at risk and at some risk in grades 1 and 2. And there are some anomalies in grades 3 and 4 that I have some ideas for what's feeding that, but I don't think we've been doing it long enough and have everything in place where we're seeing the long-term effects at this point. But that's just some elements. But there are some other things that I want to show you. If you can click the next slide, because this is the most compelling thing for me. Now, if you look at, this is one of our classrooms. In September, she had 13 of her 17 students at risk, right? That's 76% of her class. In March now, she's moved about 60% of them to some risk. And it's quite a progression for that level of need. And that's unique to this particular classroom, which that's a profoundly beautiful chart in my eyes because of the growth that they're manifesting, right? That you're seeing in that. And then the graphic on the other side shows how our students in 4th grade are doing in relation to the IAB, which is one of our standardized assessments that we've been administering as kind of a summative to units that they've been learning. This is an ELA unit in nonfiction that was just recently administered. And you can see out of this 7 students with disabilities that have been tested in that class, 5 of them are at or near standard. And that's again a pretty good growth, because our goal is to make sure our students with disabilities are meeting the grade level standards, in the same way, shape, and form that our students without disabilities are. Next slide. This is how it looks in math. We see a greater decrease of the number of at-risk students in this particular subject area. This is on math computation. Again, our goal is to move that number obviously to 0% across all grades. So that's a path we're on. Next slide. So some of the teacher commentary, I did sit down with them and just want to kind of share some of the things that they had noted as things that they find beneficial from this work. And there's been some great stories about how students feel about themselves in the way they interact in the classroom, because it's no longer just a special education student and a case manager working together. Those opportunities to be in groups with their grade level peers is maximized in many different ways. And so that's a huge one that gets brought out. And then the collaboration between the general ed teacher and the special education teacher, the benefits of all of that, both in strategy, practice, understanding of the student, and how they're able to service the students is been a great a point of continued. I'm blanking on the word I wanted to use for that, but a point of continued celebration in regard to how the teachers feel about it. Recently, next slide, Maureen. Recently, we had the Connecticut's Advancing Inclusive Principal Leadership Team members of the State Department, along with Dr. Brumman and some other central office administrators came. This was the director, I believe, Dr. Kill Quirk, and her feedback to us in terms of the practices that were at E Green. This team had visited both our school and Reynolds for some of these practices in relation to inclusive cultures and practices. Mr. Smith and I have been both asked to present at a national conference in Maryland as a result of the work that we've done, especially around the scheduling. So next slide. So again, this is kind of the general benefits and impact of the co-teaching model. What you see here, in terms of students with IEPs, without IEPs, and so on and so forth. I did cover a lot of that, I think, through the conversation, so I'm not going to go into much detail here with what those benefits are. I think you kind of see that in the teacher commentary and in some of the things that I shared with you. And then, so I had that. One of the things I always try to ask the staff is, what are the things that are holding us back? What are some of the things that we really need to be thinking about moving forward? And these are the things that they had come up with, and just making sure there's a broader understanding. I've been working with Michelle LeBrun Griffin on applying these approaches more unilaterally with some of our other staff, because we have interventionists that push into our classrooms and informing them about what co-teaching is, how it works, and what our goals are with it, is some of the things that our co-teachers feel is important. They indicate, given the challenges of writing, they think more support in that area would be beneficial. And then looking at student placements, obviously we don't want a class where 17 students or 76% of the students are at risk, so we have to really look at that more carefully. I thought we did a good job with that in terms of breaking down all of our students with disabilities, but layering in some of the other students we had. There was definitely an abundance of more than we had anticipated. And then the continued learning and application of our culturally responsive pedagogy is of critical importance. And that's it. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Go ahead, Mr. Rose.
That.
A comment. Thank you for everything.
Yes.
I know it's late and you probably want to be home. So I do appreciate it. And I love the co-teaching model that you're talking about, because Magic Wand would be great if every co-teaching model could look like that. So my question, it's more of a statement, and it's not really directed to you, but probably more towards like a general thing. So I think this is the third or fourth presentation we've had, which they're all wonderful, and I'm very happy to see the progress in Newington. But one of the things that keeps sticking out to me is we keep talking about cultural awareness and culturally responsive pedagogy. Super. But then I hear from the public that, and this was my concern when Ruth Chafee presented last year, right? We want to be culturally responsive. We have to make sure that we're culturally responsive to everyone. And that was my concern in and you didn't do that. But so I just want, when we're doing that, I want to make sure we're respecting everyone. So as we move forward, we want to make sure we're not just looking at one or two cultures, but we're looking at all cultures, because it really is important that everyone feels included. So I love the progress that you're doing, but just kind of keep that as like a bubble over your head.
Ms. Yap?
Hi, I want to say thank you so much for the presentation. And I just did want to mention, I got to tour E Green, and I got to see this teaching method firsthand, the co-teaching, and I was extremely impressed. So I want to say thank you for that. And also, your school was amazing. I did like, just watching that and seeing the flow of it firsthand in person, I thought was magnificent. Personal experience, like my son personally went through a similar teaching model and went from a child who was at one point nonverbal to a child who is doing like multiplication in kindergarten. So I know the co-teaching model works, and I know other places are using it as well. And I'm excited to see that, you're doing this at E Green, and the way you did like the schedule, I know it's like, it was a lot of work. So I do appreciate that. But I do want to say, like, watching it firsthand, going in E Green, I was with Dr. Brummett, myself, and just seeing just how the flow of the school works, how the model works. I just would say like every board member should get a chance to see that because it was a great like thing to observe. And yes, thank you so much for like doing the research, going above and beyond and doing this because I know firsthand personally with my own child, it does work. And like I said, to go from a child who was nonverbal to now is like verbal and doing like above grade level, I think is magnificent. So I know this program works and this teaching model works. So thank you very much for all your hard work. I know it's like countless hours, but thank you.
Ms. Hud Wagner?
I love this presentation. I do love the co-teaching model. I am an educator myself, so I'm unable to go into the schools and visit because got my own little 19 loves in front of me that I need to educate. So I'm unable to visit, but I do know from my own experiences that the benefit is unbelievable. And I wish, as Mr. Rose alluded to, that we as teachers sitting here could always have that model because while you did obviously speak from the benefit to the children and the benefit to the school as a whole, I think as a teacher too, there's just so much power in working with another person and really being able to target those skills. Even when teachers do small groups, so let's say we have 4 small groups moving around, it gets kind of tricky sometimes to really work with this targeted group of kiddos that need that extra really intense math intervention. And you have some students kind of investigating math problems over there and some students doing math games, and it's kind of like conducting an orchestra and there's a flying flute and it just gets crazy. So to have, that's what it feels like, really. Teachers, back me up. That's what it feels like. Okay. But when there's another person in the room that you're co-teaching with that has that skill set to hone in on these skills for these kiddos and really help them overcome any deficits or close the gaps, I think the results just go above and beyond. So thank you to all the eGreen teachers who participated in this and dedicated themselves to it and put in the hard work, obviously reaping the benefits and just wonderfulness.
Yeah, just want to echo that as love to talk about my alma mater. And it's always great to have you here. It's just crazy to see, yeah, since I've gone when Wendy was a principal there and now seeing how much growth has happened. And now I have a little cousin there and I know she's benefited from that. But I wanted to really emphasize too, we look at things in a lot of data lenses too here. And just in terms of the increase in our special ed students has been drastic, particularly in the last 5 years. So knowing that this opportunity gap is getting closed is really important. I think that's one of our missions on the board is to be able to look at opportunity gaps, and this is a big one, just obviously giving that. So kudos, great job. And just question regarding some of those testings, like, are we looking at a spring model? Maybe that's a Wendy question, a you question, but how often are we looking to kind of assess the students' progress? Because I love seeing a 0% in the winter already.
Yes, yeah. So we test them every three times a year.
Okay.
In the spring. They'll test again in the spring to see. So yeah, that's the goal. And some of the assessments are administered more often. So like the running record one I showed you is 5 times a year.
Okay.
Especially for students at risk.
Okay. Would love to see those spring numbers.
We're working on it.
Thank
They're
you.
coming. Mid-May, end of May.
Anyone else? She's already spoken.
If I could just add while that's being flushed out, that I didn't mention this when I introduced Mr. Marciano, but this is like just a small snapshot of the equity work he does at his school. I know you've done a lot of work with the Hispanic culture. I know there was also, your school did a Chinese New Year celebration. And so I know that he's working on all aspects of equity, and this was just, today was a focus on how we're trying to support our special ed students. And I will say he was rather modest in the feedback. Having been on that team and part of the debrief process, they were very impressed because they were also looking at some of our multilingual kids, which wasn't their initial focus, but they were looking at it anyway. And also how the culture of the school was, how children were treating each other and interacting with each other. And they were very impressed with the kindness and the collaboration that they saw among the children as well as the adults. So I do appreciate how you've kind of cultivated that at your school. And obviously, we always have more work to be done.
Anastasia, did you have another question? Okay,
Must be just a visit.
no, very good. Well,
Yes, I did, actually. Sorry, I didn't know if you heard me.
go ahead.
So my question maybe is for Dr. Brummett. I know that everyone, has different work situations, they don't maybe not work remote or, whatever. Is there any way that they could make some sort of like video, maybe just showing the board or just how the model works or how this teaching method works for those who don't have the opportunity because of, not having that remote option, maybe they can see it just so they can get the opportunity to see what I saw and just how it flows and maybe how we could, put that teaching model in all the schools. Is there any way they can make a video for the board? I don't know if that's allowed or just so everyone can see that and get that opportunity. Is that something that we can do, Dr. Brummett?
Yeah, I would have to kind of figure out how to do it with confidentiality purposes, but, and it also is a model that we're running at Reynolds. So let me talk to the respective principals to see if that's something we could do while respecting and being cognizant of confidentiality.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so very much. We have more.
I do have, that's it for that update, but I do have under new business.
Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item F, our new business. And the first thing is going to be the report of an update on equity survey. You have a guest here.
I do. Craig, were you able
Guests,
to
plural.
update the presentation? Is it linked in the main frame here? Then this should be it. Beautiful. So I just want to introduce, before we launch into the presentation, that I am joined this evening by some very good collaborators and partners, really, in our work toward determining how are we doing with our equity work. So I'm joined this evening by Yvonne Alston from Indelible Impressions, as well as another colleague, Armando Jimenez. And they have been integral in both the development of the survey, the interpretation of the survey, and what we're going to show you tonight was what kind of results that we gleaned from that. And we'll show you at least a portion of a video that was created to kind of give some information to the community. Because one thing I think we've learned through the efforts, and I'll let Yvonne and Armando speak to it as well, is, we need more communication around these issues. Absolutely. And perhaps some of what we heard this evening earlier on was not enough communication about what we're actually doing to address some of the issues that cause angst or upset with our constituents. So let me put this on present. So, and I will let Yvonne and Armando jump in as they see fit. You just have to make sure your mic is on the green. I'm sure Wendy has already tipped you off to that trick. We administered the survey in the fall, and it went out. We deliberated about who it should go to, but ultimately it went to every staff member in the district electronically. We also agreed that high school students who have a maturity level that they could handle the survey and respond. All parents and guardians were sent the survey through electronic means, and it went out to community members, though I will say that was probably our smallest response rate. How it was done, virtually all electronic. We put it through to parents on Parent Square or guardians, and then we also put it on our website, and some of our partners put it on their websites. So that is really what happened. And we did get a fair response rate of well over 800 responses. So was this the slide you wanted to speak to, Yvonne, or the next one?
I'm fine to speak to the next one.
Okay.
Do you want to run it?
So our respondents ranged from this group, and I want to break it down very generally about what type of feedback we received. So the students were the most, in my opinion, some of the most powerful feedback that we got. When we dove into it with another partner of Yvonne's, which is the Yellow Brick, what's the second part of their name? Yellow Brick Communications, or?
No, it's just Yellow Brick.
So Yellow Brick is an organization that worked with us to analyze our data. And I'll let Yvonne speak to that in her remarks. But what was found based on that analysis was that our students were 100%, and it's not an exaggeration, 100% in support of our equity work. In fact, they want to be more involved. They want their student voice to be heard, and we're going at that through many different mechanisms. And they also hope to see the community support this. They do know that this is something that might not necessarily be 100% embraced by all stakeholders, but that is something that they want. Similarly, our administrators and educators, and they're kind of grouped into one bucket, also felt that they understood the importance of academic excellence for all. In other words, they know that our opportunity and achievement gap is something that needs to change, and that we can be very proud of the achievement of many of our students, but we have to be mindful of those students that are not doing as well. They also had 99% of the statements that they made about our equity work were positive. As we moved along to parents and guardians, the feedback that we got is they want to be involved. They're willing to prioritize the student needs, but they want more transparency with our objectives and our efforts. So those are things that we took to heart and did some work on already. And similarly, the community members, and it was a pretty small response rate, but they also wanted to be involved, and they did have probably the most concerns out of the entire survey responders were, what is our purpose? What's the reason we're doing this? What's any type of agenda behind it? All right, now I want to ask Yvonne Armando to speak to this slide before we kick off the video that we have produced. So Yvonne, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Brummett, and the entire Board of Education here at Newington Public Schools for allowing us to join you this evening. I speak as the Chief Culture Architect, CEO, and founder of Indelible Impressions with my colleague here, Armando Jimenez. Our goal with this project and partnering with Newington Public Schools was to gain a better understanding of not just the equity work that's ongoing, but the equity work that's still needed throughout the school district. And what was critical to all of us engaged in this project, including ourselves at Indelible Impressions, our data partner Yellowbrick, as well as the Equity Office and Dr. Brummett as head of Newington Public Schools, was that we captured the voices of as many people in the district as possible. And that's intentional. We know that when we capture more voices, we get a much clearer picture of perspectives, of experiences, and that's very key when you're talking about the premise of equity. So as a next step, based on what we have learned, what we have gleaned, and the continued steps that we anticipate taking, we intend to make sure that we're communicating, that we're clarifying the objectives of the work and the partnership that we have, and to make sure that we're getting more feedback. So as a next step, you will definitely see subsequent surveys that'll be going out, and that we're going to continue to measure sentiment in the town from all of the different audiences as has been outlined. We're also going to be identifying and developing opportunities to listen, learn, lean in, partner, and advocate. And I think that it's really important when we start to contemplate some of the other members that are, so to speak, outside of the work of Newington Public Schools. When you start talking about the community, right, the support agencies, business owners, even like myself, had I not been head of this project, it would be really important to get my perspective in that as well, because we all have a stake in the progress of the students in this community. We all have a stake in who they become, and to ensure that they are well equipped to achieve success in this new global world. And then creating strategy and action plans that really address that identified barriers and needs. We're digging deep into that data to make sure that we understand what those barriers are, and then breaking out into different segments and different groups, ways to address that, different strategies. Again, making sure that we're contemplating the voices of all those involved, and then implementing and measuring along the way. So whatever comes out of the data in terms of what we learn from people through things like additional surveys, focus groups, and interviews, we're going to put together some strategies to implement, and we're going to measure the success of that. I think with any school district, as we know, there's not a tried and true strategy that works across the board because you're dealing with diverse populations. As a result, we're going to be measuring and saying, hey, is this working? Is this not working so well? Are we capturing the right voices? Are we actually making progress? And then calibrating throughout that. Armando, do you have anything to share in addition?
Armando Jimenez here. It's a pleasure. Thank you as well. I echo everything Yvonne mentioned. Our goal is to contribute and complement the work that you're doing, not to contradict or conflict. We are here to partner, and as we come in with our expertise, we are also students to learn how we can make sure that the mesh that we are creating is as strong as it's ever been for the future of the students that come to the NPS district.
Thank you very much. And I want to make sure I elaborate on the work that Armando as well as Yellow Brick supported us with, is really diving into this data and really developing a communication strategy. That's something we really, I don't want to say agonized about, but I think we did because we knew it'd be critical. How do we put this out in a way that will be received in the intent that it's meant to be? So with that in mind, after much discussion, and of course, Dr. Hirson was intimately involved, we determined that a fireside chat video would be our best way to go. Spoiler alert, there's no fire, and we're basically just talking. But it is our way of trying to subtly talk through some of the issues that were raised in the survey results and open up the dialogue. You'll know, and I think we'll show about 5 minutes of the video. It's about 16 minutes long. But at some point in the video, and I think you'll see it, a QR code is prompted onto the screen, and that allows the viewer to then, take a picture of the QR code and then provide further feedback to us. We did it strategically that way so that the viewer would start watching the video before they would provide the feedback, because this is our attempt now to address any misunderstandings that we thought came through with the survey. So with Craig's assistance, this video worked an hour ago. So I have to
Stop sharing.
Okay.
You're just that tab.
So go share tab. And then that's the video. Okay.
I want to make it big first. There you go. And then screen it. Just check your volume.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yvonne Alston. I am the Chief Culture Architect and CEO of Indelible Impressions Consulting. My firm collaborated with Newington Public Schools on a recent equity survey that many of you participated in. It was distributed across our town and solicited feedback from students at the high school level, parents and custodians, AKA families, administrators, educators, and community members. We are very glad to report that we had an amazing turnout of participants for that survey that was focused on equity within the NPS community. Now, today, I have the privilege and honor of meeting with Dr. Brummett, Superintendent of Schools here for NPS, and we're just going to have a brief chat about the recent survey findings and what NPS intends to do with them. So welcome, Dr. Brummett. Thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you, Yvonne.
All right. Well, I am sure the community is eager to hear about what we learned. So I'd like to get right into it. But first, I would like to start off and just ask you, what is the current vision for Newington Public Schools?
Well, it's certainly a multi-layered vision, but first and foremost, we want all of our children to be highly prepared for life after graduation with a plan that is achievable and, rigorous, having high standards for themselves. But as a subset and equally important, we want to make sure that we are working toward the reduction of the opportunity gap for our students, especially those who are historically marginalized or underrepresented. And we intend to do that through access to our high quality curriculum that's rigorous, relevant, and engaging. So those are really two big overarching themes for us here in Newington Public Schools.
Fantastic. So despite what some folks might hear in social circles or around town, the true purpose of driving equity through engaging with students in the community is really focused on the students, right? Student supporters within and outside of the schools is focused on their social emotional learning, helping them to hurdle barriers and challenges to success and to best prepare them for our evolving global world. You would say that's correct?
I would. And a quick story. I visited a kindergarten classroom yesterday for the Read Across America Day, and the book I read to the kids was all about how to identify their emotions. And it was really important, and I saw within their responses that they are learning about that emotions are okay and how to deal with them and how to make sure that they are a part of their educational day, that they're okay. But yet we need to know how to manage them sometimes. So that was something that I witnessed firsthand yesterday. I also want to make sure that we look at our achievement gap and have a purposeful and intentional effort toward reducing it. We're not unique here in Newington. Pretty much every district in the state of Connecticut has an achievement gap. What I think makes us different is we are taking steps to reduce it by focusing on it and making sure we're meeting the needs of all of our kids.
Fantastic. And I can tell how passionate that you are about that. And so that's great. So in terms of some of the responses that we got back, I want to highlight for our viewers today that when it came to participating in the survey and some of the questions around equity, that 100% of the student comments about it were positive. Educators' comments landed at a whopping 99% positive, with parents trailing very close to that at 79%, and members of the public came in at 75% positive in their comments around this equity work and what the district is doing. How do you feel about that?
Well, I was thrilled by the student responses, but at the end of the day, I was not surprised, because in my conversation with students, they tell me that all the time, that they want our school district to be equally good for all children. And some of them acknowledge that maybe their experiences weren't always that way, but they're helping us work on this so that maybe their younger siblings will have a better experience. Parents tell me that as well, and my staff. But I also want to acknowledge that, and I want to also say this, teachers are working diligently to learn as much as they can about how to engage all of our students through culturally relevant pedagogy. I'm very proud of all of our teachers and their efforts to date. I also want to acknowledge we did have, the chunk of folks there, around 20 to 25% through parents or community members who were a little unclear or concerned about where we're headed. And I'm hoping our discussion today may help clear up some of that.
Fantastic. And I think it will. So I very much appreciate that. And you're right regarding this student. I'd like to read one of the student comments that said, I think open-mindedness by everyone, students, parents, teachers, and volunteers is really needed so that we can try to reduce barriers. And also that if something doesn't work, there should be a willingness to try again or to try something new. And I think the voices of the youth came through very clear about what's needed in terms of collaboration across the spectrum of our community so that they can be successful. And I really appreciated the students saying that there should be a willingness to try again and try something new. And I think that this generation, what we see here at Indelible, when we engage with students in capacities like this, is that they are very much open to understanding that everything that we try to help them be successful may not land 100% from the very beginning, but it's constantly reframing and redesigning as need be to be successful in our efforts for their growth. So I'm
going to stop it there and just kind of expound upon that particular segment that we are currently working on getting more student voice. Dr. Hairston and I have done outreach to some of our high school students, and several clubs have put forth students who are very interested in being part of this work. And that is our next step. And you know, based on tonight's comments earlier, I want to put out again that we have had some missteps along the way. And I think it's important to be transparent. An example of that is a book list that went out that wasn't as balanced in offering a variety of reading materials that it should have been. But because we've got many processes established in the district, that was dealt with. We worked with the school and the grade level involved and talked through how we need to process how we cultivate book lists. And, you know, for the parents that voiced concern, there were two. We reached out to them and, you know, dealt with that very openly. And so to say that we are where we need to be with equity is not true, but we are, I would say, very valiant in our attempts to move forward. And I think we are starting to see the impact. What Mr. Marciano shared tonight, we see pockets of that throughout the district. And the goal is that we're going to continue this work for several years to come. But I think clearly this video, which will go on for another 10 minutes, but in the interest of time, I won't show, will show some of our, you know, constituents where we're trying to go with this. So I don't know if Yvonne or Armando would like to make any closing remarks.
I just want to say that I appreciate the dedication to equity by this school district. I appreciate the fact that this board has prioritized this as something that is important for our students and being willing to engage in conversations. You know, equity is really at its heart about providing access of opportunities for all, regardless of how an individual might identify, regardless of what socioeconomic status they and their families may have, things like that. And so I just want to say thank you to you all. Thank you to Dr. Brummett and the entire Newington Public School System staff that you've allowed us to partner with you to drive this very important change. And we're excited about the future of this, and we're dedicated to the work.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Dr. Fletcher for any follow-up questions.
All right. We'll go here. Beth first.
Oh, okay.
I looked there first. Don't
Okay, because I
worry.
didn't want to.
So the last board meeting, I got lasted every single time. And I was like, do I not have a voice? So that's what I'm about. I didn't want you to think we're crazy. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I'm a clockwise kind of guy.
So first, just wanted to say that I appreciate this. Something that I just really want to highlight here were the words from our students, the words that were read by one of our students, and the fact that they had the 99% positive rate. What was 100? I'm sorry. My apologies. Even better. Up a point. They, through what was just said, it seems like they are the ones kind of like shouting out, reaching out, like, we need this. We need to do the work. We want to be a part of the work. And so we have to give them that. We have to give them that. I think that student voice in everything we do is incredibly important and incredibly powerful. And that's just like something I passionately believe in. So I just wanted to say that. But I also wanted to go back, and I know that I'm guessing we're going to be unpacking the data that came from these surveys more. And I never want to look at negative things, but I think it is important. I know it was mentioned that there were some misunderstandings by the community, and that like, I'm just looking at like the community had the 75%, which is still very good, but I'm just wondering if there's any anecdotal or any statements kind of behind that 25% of negative results. Is that the correct way to say that? Okay.
Sure. So what I will say to that, without having the specific numbers right in front of me, what we do know based on what we received is that when we talk about some of the misunderstandings, right? So for example, one example is CRT, right? And where people are automatically assuming that that's critical race theory rather than culturally responsive teaching. So that's one of the aspects of the misunderstanding about what's really going on and what is being focused on within Newington public school systems. Part of the video that people will be able to watch once it's posted up online and they have access to the questionnaire as well is that there are different perspectives about what Newington is doing and what Newington is not doing. And I actually did pose some of those challenging questions directly to Dr. Brummett in the video, which you'll see, and be able to further understand what some of the possibly negative sentiments are around what's going on. But I can say with much confidence that a lot of it is around misinformation. There were, in some regards, some inflammatory language that was used regarding that, such as indoctrination and things like that. But for the most part, it really does center around misinformation and people concerned about what equity would really mean for them. And I think, again, that's where not understanding truly what equity is and looking at it only through the lens of race and ethnicity versus understanding the broader context of that equity covers a myriad dimensions of diversity, right? And different identities. And at its core, it really is about making sure that every single student has access to what they need to be successful, no matter how that student might identify. So as an example, if there are students that are part of the disability community, we want to make sure that they're getting all their needs met. That's just one segment of a diverse population. So if you were to take that logic and apply it more broadly, you would see that that's something that every single one of us would want for any student. And so that's something that I think we need to come around as a community, is to understand for those folks that may not be clear about terminology, definitions, and how they're being applied could certainly impact that 25%. And I feel fairly confident that what you would probably see is that drops down to about 10 if they fully understood the context and the meaning of what we're doing and why.
Good. Go ahead.
I like you. Oh, thank you.
I can go really quick. Beth asked my question, but in a much better way. So I'm really glad you asked that. I will ask a softball then. In terms of this video, I think in response to the fact that the people that maybe aren't as invested in what happens in our schools from a day-to-day basis, a lot of people probably didn't take the survey. So I'm just wondering, in terms of this video and then either further surveys or further videos that explain, because I think a lot of what you just explained is also communicating our efforts to the public and communicating them in a way that people who aren't invested in Newington Public Schools can understand, the way that you just did, where it's not just about one segment, it's about everybody. So I'm wondering if there are ways that we can, and I don't know the answer to this, we have to get this information out to the public that we do need to be invested in what happens here. So I'm wondering, just initially, this video, what is the plan to distribute it outside of Newington Public Schools? Because I know we had community members that took the survey. But then next steps, how do we follow up to get not only more people in the community to take the survey, but more people to better understand what we're trying to achieve? And maybe that's not a softball, because I feel like I just
I was
added
gonna
some
say,
layers. Yeah.
Softball, but it's moving a lot.
Yeah, that's my bad. But go ahead, please answer.
Sure.
I will let you do that since she likes you.
Okay, fantastic. So to your question about making sure that the video is well distributed, it is going to live on the Equity Office's landing page where the survey information did before, so people will be able to watch the video. To Dr. Brummett's earlier point regarding the QR code, what they'll be able to do is look at that hit that QR code and be able to access a questionnaire. We thought it was really important for people to be able to ask questions, to dig a little bit deeper in terms of something that they didn't understand or wanting to, asking for expansion on something. We are limiting that to 2 questions per person, or if possible, per household. But we wanted to give the option for an additional data collection based on what was delivered in the survey. So everyone in the community, everyone who has digital access to a computer or a smartphone, or a iPad or some other tablet will be able to access that questionnaire. From that, we're going to digest that, we're going to categorize those questions, and we're going to answer them. In terms of delivery of response, we are strategizing on that currently as to whether or not that will be an Excel spreadsheet, that might be another video. We're not quite sure yet. It depends on the volume we get and how much bucketing and segmenting we actually have to do. And in terms of communicating further with the community, part of what we have been discussing and strategizing on with NPS, with Dr. Gerald Harrison and the team is how we engage folks. And focus groups is a really great way to bring people together, to hear voices, and to give people the opportunity to share what they're thinking, what their concerns are, and how to be better educated on some of the core meanings of things and what we're actually doing, right? Rather than things running through a rumor mill, and before you know it, it becomes, culturally responsive teaching becomes critical race theory and things like that. So that's going to be a really important next step for us. And our intention is to galvanize all the voices of the community in different segments. And then again, to make sure that we're conveying our findings openly, transparently, with the intention of doing our level best to commit to closing both knowledge and behavior gaps.
Just to follow up, are you able to pull the data of how people came to the survey?
So the interesting thing is, because of the way that the surveys are set up, anonymity is really important. We find it indelible impressions for people to feel like they really want to give their honest opinion and feedback on things. So were not any mechanisms built into the system in order to capture any personally identifiable information. Furthermore, the distribution of that link went to various groups. So as Dr. Brummett has mentioned, it went through a portal to parents. It went here, there. It went through, I believe, community newsletters, through the Chamber of Commerce. So it's really difficult to be able to track those aspects. However, in the demographics in the survey, and I do hope everyone took the survey, you were able to actually select how you identify so that we could categorize as much as possible based on if you were a community member, if you were a student, et cetera. So we do have a numerical breakdown of folks who actually made those selections to see kind of where they fall.
So then, for example, if I said I was a business owner, which I'm not in Newington,
Yes.
if I said that, then we could potentially assume that maybe I got the information from the chamber. But if I was one of only 4 people who said that, then maybe we need to figure out a way with the chamber to alter the communication effort. Is that something that we're looking at in terms of, because I think that we just need to really make sure the community's invested in this effort.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was part of the strategic communication plans in the beginning, is to figure out what were all the distribution channels that we could disseminate the link for the survey. Is part of the reason why we set up the landing page, giving directives. I believe I even did a voiceover talking to folks about the survey and why it was important to take it. But I think the next level is to just keep the conversation going in the broadest forums as possible. And so I think socializing the information is a really big part of that. So what I would encourage even the board to do is to talk about it. Talk about it in your workplaces, if those are here in the town of Newington, if you have relatives, spouses, partners, et cetera, that are members of the Newington community, continue to amplify this work because it's really important. And again, it always comes back to the students. We want to set them up for success. And this is a surefire way to do that. I mean, you're just hearing, I think tonight alone was extremely impressive to Armando and I about the equity work that's going on in other schools, right? This is important. It's top talk and it's top of mind in our society overall. So the more that we amplify this and we encourage participation, I think that we'll have a chance to get even more voices and for people to really start to take this seriously and invest both time, conversations, and I dare even say heart, as well as minds into forwarding equity.
All right, online, Mr. Leverrier.
Hi, thank you. I guess my question, because like the term itself of culturally responsive teaching, culturally responsible pedagogy, I mean the acronym compared to the critical race theory, it's like literally the same letters. Is this like a term that's only been used in the past couple of years?
Culturally responsive pedagogy?
Well, the culturally responsive teaching, because I've like literally never heard this until the the equity versus equality dichotomy in education. I mean, I haven't heard these terms until after the critical race theory being brought to the forefront, and I'm wondering if this is just like almost like a reactive term being used to portray equity work in a different light, or is this something, are these terms that we've used for a long time?
These are research-based terms. We have several what we call canons in the district, and one of them is called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, and that's a research-based book that has, evidence-based techniques or frameworks that you can apply that will work well for all children. So that's a research-based terminology. It wasn't something that we created here or that was a reaction to anything. It's not, we can't even take credit for it. We've extrapolated it from the research. So no, that the answer to your question would be no, it is not some reaction or a reconfiguration of that acronym.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
All right, Ms. Weaver.
Just really quickly, I was just going to add anecdotally that I had just said that when I was in college at the University of St. Joseph, one of my classes was culturally responsive teaching. And that was
Many moons ago.
Oh, I thought
It was a few years ago.
2005. So I don't know how, I don't know where it was before that, but I just remember that definitely being a teacher preparedness class that you had to take in order to become an educator.
Thanks, Beth.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. And it's wonderful to have one of my mentors here, Mondo Jimenez. Is awesome. We've crossed paths before, so this is like full circle for me. And it's great that it's on this issue. And I think one of the things too, we were talking about in the policy committee probably a couple months ago was some of the policies we're looking at. And I was like, this is from 2001 and it says equity in this. So to say like this is a new term, I think is one of the things we were discussing of how we clarify a lot of things, because there are a lot of charged words, I think, in this space. And I think one of the things we've talked about as a board, even amongst each other, is, well, what did you mean by that? Well, wait, when you're saying this, what do we mean by that? So even, those in this space, I think sometimes we try and get those clarity on that term. And I know that's part of that work is making sure it's throughout our staff and administration that we get the clarity just within the school system, not even just on the outside. So I guess my question too is, in terms of the survey, can community members still take the survey? How are we kind of keeping progress, and are there going to be other iterations? I know you said kind of future high level strategic plans, but how do we keep tracking this data? How do we get more buy-in and more input, and so we can see changes? Wendy does a lovely job giving us fall, winter, and spring and many data points. So just seeing how we can get more data points to be able to, like you said, get that more holistic view.
Sure. So at this point, that
Richard, would you mind? Oh, thank you. He closed his mic.
okay.
Been creating noise in the room. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem at all. In terms of this particular survey is now closed. So it is not accessible to anyone because we had it out there for quite some time in which to capture voices. And so that one is done, but we do have, I want to say off the top of my head, at least 3 more that we are going to be running successively. But again, we're going to have other data capture points, right? So as I mentioned, individual interviews and focus groups and things like that. We will be collecting data throughout and we will be reporting that data directly to Superintendent Brumette as well as others on the team. And we will make sure that part of that is transparent to everyone so that they know how things are tracking and the progress being made. And in terms of goals, we really do like to use the data as a compass, right? So while we have some ideas and some strategies that we're thinking of and we're planning, the data that we continue to acquire will continue to inform, right? What's needed, how we calibrate, how we pivot for different strategies and different tactics.
And may I recommend audiobooks for your voice? It's wonderful. It just it soothes me. I'm like, I would read your audiobook.
And if I may add, and Dr. Brumette knows this, at Indelible Impressions, we work with our heart and minds through intentionality. So we don't just create surveys to collect data because it's great to collect data. How many times do you go to a store and someone says, "Oh, can you please leave us a survey?" If someone really left a lasting or an indelible impression, you would go ahead and take the time to make that survey. And so the partnership that we have all around the mesh that we mentioned earlier, it's about making sure that people understand, okay, I took this survey, I see things happening. Because many of us have experienced taking surveys and things haven't changed. So for us, we don't just put a bunch of questions to collect data points. We intentionally sit down to say, hey, here are some of the opportunities. Here are some of the strengths. Let's try to gather more information. And to your point, Mr. Michael, what you were saying about how do we strategically get that out, right? Sometimes the conversation, somebody going for a cup of coffee, right? Or maybe saying, hey, I wasn't able to take the survey. However, I want to get involved, right? Because this work is important to what we're doing. And it all comes back to the students, right? It all comes back to what we're doing. You asked a great question, Ms. Danielle, about, or you mentioned earlier, overall, how are we doing, keeping in mind of the communities and the groups that are identified? You are all doing it here in so many ways. Miss Ribeiro? The fact that she is in practice of diversity through language, through Stuco, right? That right there is diversity. Then what we see, Marciano, Mr. Marciano in his school, right? Equity at his school, right? Through students with disabilities. That was one of to your question, Ms. Beth, where some of the clarifications where some people looked at it and said, oh, diversity. Well, we have enough people who identify as Latin Americans or African Americans, right? Diversity is far beyond that. And you all are touching elements, right? I always say there's a million pieces to a puzzle, right? And every puzzle has its value. You are all working on your own pieces to the puzzle because it's a larger picture. And little by little, this puzzle is going to come together through this partnership. So.
And I just wanted to add one thing that I think a lot of times we're trying to clarify too, that we don't work from a space of scarcity, but an abundance. And I think that sometimes gets lost in all of this, but thank you.
I just need to say I like you too.
Like 6 years to get halfway.
Anything else?
No, I just want, obviously, hopefully the board can take away from this presentation that we are surrounding ourselves with extremely capable partners who are very knowledgeable about the work we're attempting. That's our intention, because we don't know all there is to know. And we've got a lot of good people around us that do know more than us and are sharing their expertise, and the conversation will continue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to be moving on to agenda item F2, which, no? Okay. Did I miss something?
No, she's sad because she's got to graduate.
Oh,
That was her baby is graduating, so. Go ahead.
okay, thank you.
Don't have to read the motion.
Any tissues anywhere in the room? Okay, so we're going to have discussion and possible action on the establishment of a firm graduation date. So Dr. Brummett?
Yes, this year, the high school opted to, we've been in constant conversation with high school leadership because last year, the graduation date was far earlier than the last day of school for students because we had a bunch of snow days. This year, we only had one. So they now feel ready to move forward with establishing a graduation date. They didn't avail themselves of the new state law that went into effect a few years ago that they could have set this date or recommended it to the board back in September. But based on last year, they wanted to wait quite a bit into the school year. So the recommendation is that our graduation date will be June 12th. And I believe that would be the motion that is before the board this evening.
All right.
Motion then discuss.
Yes, we're going to motion, then discuss.
Oh, okay, no.
Move that the Board of Education approve Monday, June 12th, 2023 as the firm graduation date for students in grade 12 for the graduating class of 2023 at Newington High School.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. We're now open for discussion. Any questions or comments to be made? Extra box of tissues that night? Okay.
I feel bad for Beth because she sits next to me.
Extra long sleeves for me.
You thought I cried last year?
Okay. All right. So if the clerk, let's call the roll.
Michael Branda,
Yes.
Danielle Droz,
Can I abstain? Yes.
Dr. Bruce Fletcher,
Yes.
Beth Menke Hut Wagner,
Yes.
Yes.
Sam Sharma,
Pam is not in the meeting. Yeah, I believe at 8.
Jessica Wheeler,
Yes.
Anastasia Yap.
Yes.
The motion passed unanimously, 7-0.
All right, excellent. Thank you, everybody. Next item on our agenda is the discussion and possible action of the BOE CIP account projects.
Oh, I was going to. Would it be okay, Dr. Fletcher, if we did the budget first, if we reordered that?
We absolutely can. There's no motion made, so we can do that.
Thank you.
So we're going to do item number 4, which is the update on the budget of 2023-24.
And actually, they're sort of intertwined. So however the board wants to handle that, there is a motion, though, relative to the capital plan.
Okay.
So I just wanted to keep the board abreast of where we are. And before I go further, Ms. Yap, as a update to the finance committee, would you like to provide this update or would you like me to?
You can provide it. It's fine.
All right, thank you. So the finance committee met last week. This summarizes where they began. And the board's aware that we landed at a 5.95%, which is before the town council right now. However, we continue to look at possible savings while the town continues to deliberate their budget process. And through the course of numerous discussions, the following reductions could be further made. There's no need for the board to take action tonight. It would be wise to wait to see where the town lands. But we have, and we also want to acknowledge that we took some of the feedback that we received during the budget presentation before the town and did more updated estimates. So with all that in mind, we were able to recommend a reduction of $41,000 in diesel fuel because the price has come down substantially since we first ran the numbers. And as the board knows, we look at our budget process starting in January. And even before that, actually, we start pulling our books together in November. So looking at it with a fresh set of eyes to see if prices are coming down is smart. And that is luckily what happened with diesel. So that is a recommendation for a $41,000 reduction. Electricity has also come down by kilowatt hour, and that would allow us to cut our electricity budget by $149,000. We looked at our other salaries line very carefully, and we looked at a history, and that is something the board had asked us to do as well. And we feel comfortable reducing that line by $100,000. Our athletic department was asked to look at their their supply line, and they're recommending a reduction of $20,000. We looked with spoke with our professional learning supplies, and this really is Steve's area of expertise. I will say this is a painful cut, but is something that we could put forward as a means to try to close this gap. And lastly, Wendy Kraus and Kristen Freeman dove real deep into the curriculum line items, and those were particularly brought up by the town council because some of those went up quite a bit this year, though a lot of that is the function of some of the previous buy-aheads. Ms. Kraus and Ms. Freeman did feel comfortable recommending a $61,000 reduction. So if all these were to be eventually agreed upon by the board, that would reduce the current budget request to 5.43%. So that really is my budget update. It is pretty similar to what very similar to what the finance committee saw last week. We are constantly looking at the budget. There are no new reductions that we feel comfortable recommending at this time. I would recommend that we continue to work with the town to discuss what there are some collaborative things we can do. I was notified by Acting Town Manager Kropinski today that the MOUs will be on the agenda for the town council meeting on Tuesday. So if those two MOUs are approved by the town or agreed upon, then that would allow us to reduce our budget by about $557,000, which would further reduce this by, I don't want to put you on the spot, Lou, but that would probably bring us below 5% if we were to cut the MOU offsets. Right. So we were below 5% at that point. There is still a gap to close, though. There's a $1.9 million reduction as recommended by the town manager. So if that $557,000 is approved, and we're down to 4.9, we still have a gap of the 3.5 that the town manager is recommending to 4.9, and that equates to about $1.5 million. So we do have, a lot to still consider. And again, ongoing outreach to the town and an attempt to see if there are any other solutions besides, we're getting dangerously close. We're already there with further cuts going right into staffing or services like busing or different programs that we offer could have to be reduced if this gap does not somehow close. So that's kind of where we're at. No action, just information. All right.
Any questions from anyone?
Are there any others? I know we've gone over this, but we are penny pinching because I think we're all in agreement. I don't mean to speak for anyone, so I apologize, but that we would rather cut a thing than a person. I think we're on that sort of page. And so just wondering if there's anywhere that if we had to go without, yeah, it's hard to say. No, it is. It's like, it's hard to say because I don't want to cut anything, right? Like, and at the end of the day, we're not really the ones necessarily cutting it. So I just want to make that kind of statement. But we have to make changes before it gets to a point where an individual, an educator is cut. So I'm just thinking, I'm just going to throw things out there, and I just hope that tomatoes don't kind of get thrown my way, but like, the number of new library books this year, like, could that be decreased? And I'm an avid lover of readers, so I'm just trying to think creatively. I'm sorry, it makes me nervous because I don't want to be pegged as like, I'm taking things away from the poor little children. I'm not, I'm a teacher. Like I pick up pencils off the floor and save them. Like I save paper clips, but is there anywhere else? Is there any way we can get creative and we can dig further? I don't know.
Well, I'm going to ask Wendy to maybe explain what went into the cut of 61,000, but the board finance subcommittee did bring up the infamous Desmos. So I did ask Wendy to bring that back, and I don't know if you've had a chance yet, Wendy, to have an analysis done about how important that is to teachers. But we are going to look into that. Would you mind giving a quick update as to what went into that $61,000 cut and how you were able to come upon that?
Sure. And it's interesting, Beth, that you brought up library media books, because when I saw the slide, I made a note to tell Maureen that media should be listed in there too, because we did cut the media books significantly by more than half. What we did is we went through all of the programs that we're responsible for, and we actually included library media, EL, and art because we saw some possibilities there. ELA, reading and math, because there's bigger ticket items. Social studies and science were really hard to cut. There's not much in there aside from what's required to run the program. So the lens we used was, if we cut this, could we have a replacement or something else and still run the program? And that's how we came up with the number that you see there. We have 3 other items that we're looking at, but we're talking to the department coordinators right now. I think their meeting is next week, Dr. Brummett, with Kristen Freeman, to discuss what the impact would be if because the program is designed a certain way right now. So if you take one thing away, we have to talk to them about what does it need to be replaced with. What we were cutting were things that we can go without that for a year, like library media books is an example of that. Should we cut something like online program we're using or something like Desmos, then we have to think about, do we have the replacement item behind that? So it won't be a complete cut. We'd have to offset it with something, but it might be it might still be a saving. So that's the conversation we're in right now. So we could see some additional there, but we're not comfortable cutting it without further conversation with our department.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Ms. Weaver? And then we have Anastasia online.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify too, because I know there were like comments at, I think, town council. I didn't see, but that we cut all of these things as a board, which is not true. So I just want to clarify, those are not actual cuts yet. Those are just proposed ideas. And just to clarify more, it's sitting with the town council right now, who is considering it. I believe they just adopted the town manager's budget last night. And then that will be a public hearing on April 4th. I think so. Currently, the control of what actually is getting cut on, or not cut, but considered on our budget is with the town council, and we're not actively taking action on this because we need to be able to know what the actual request is. And I'm just wondering too, in terms of Ms. Making Up Wagner's mindset of thinking creatively too, like how much interaction we have with the town as a full board on how we can, come together with this gap. I think you did a great presentation, but how do we signify? I mean, I think every department will say the same thing about their needs, like this is needs, not wants. But where does the town budget compare to where we're at right now? I just am not sure. I just want to clarify, like, what's their increase ask, and then what's like how our compares in terms of like what's getting cut compared to ours. That's not a clear question, but I'm trying to say we have an ask. It is getting below ask. Which departments are not below ask? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
but not by breakdown. Yeah.
I mean, Lou would know. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, Lou, what the town manager's proposed increase was on the town side of things.
I don't remember off the top of my
Yeah.
head. It was more than the board regs, no. Probably in the vicinity of 5%.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't have it committed to memory.
I'm sorry, I was
don't
out
know.
Beauty and the Beast last night, watching Dr. Brummett,
that's
so I
what I was
didn't catch the town council meeting, but
But I don't want to speak off the cuff. You
Yeah.
can certainly provide
Yeah.
that to the board. I don't want to misrepresent that in any way, shape, or form. So much, I think they're at the process, like the board, when the board took over the superintendent's budget, now they're
in
town
that
council's
budget,
taking over
yeah.
the town
I'm
manager's
just
budget.
wondering what the opportunity with this long-winded question is that, what is our opportunity to still collaborate with the town council on this? Like, in terms of not just us doing the creativity, but on the town side as well, just seeing where there's the collaboration opportunities.
I can respond to that, and then if any other board member, I mean, I've had a lot of outreach with the mayor. And I think the MOU process is step one, because that is, they need to take affirmative action on that in the coming, and it is on their agenda or will be for the next Tuesday meeting. From there, we still have a shortfall. I have offered, to meet with her and any of her leadership teams that's willing to do so about any other ways we can provide relief to the significant cut. One of the strategies that we're working on now is, as I think the board's fully aware, I have put a hard freeze in place. Every penny that goes out the door has to go through my office. Now, I always approve purchase orders. This now is things that come up. The boiler needed some part last week. I had to approve that. So anything that comes up that can be done without, we're doing without. And obviously, we're repairing the boiler. But, we're making those judgment calls. Someone wanted to go to a training. I said, no, you're going to have to wait to next year or beyond. So any purchasing right now is only bare essentials to get through the year. And maybe we can not rely as much on the non-lapsing fund and see where that gets us to as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. And Lou, did you want to add something to that?
I just went and looked up their budget.
Oh, okay.
And it's the town government operations were 4.25%. I'm sorry. Town operations were 4.25%. And overall, the debt service, there's multiple categories. It appears like it's about 5% increase on the debt service side. Ours was 3.5%.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Anastasia.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. So I did want to clarify. So yes, these are proposals that, sorry, I'm losing my voice, that we thought of in the finance committee. I know there were other things that we didn't put in there. We were hoping that we wouldn't get what the town manager proposed. Obviously, that's why we worked so hard to try to come up with additional tentative, adjustments, as as I should say. I am going to say the finance committee and the members of it, Danielle, Sam, Dr. Brummett helped, Lou, everyone. We've tried every single thing. I mean, we met before, we met during the finance meeting. I mean, we went through every single tab that we can think of to try to come up with additional cuts. And I understand they haven't been accepted by the board, but, usually you don't have like a finance meeting in between. That's not typical, but seeing what the town manager proposed, we were just trying to be proactive. And maybe if, we did have the mayor and others on the call, if they saw that, then maybe they would take, that into consideration. Obviously, I didn't watch the meeting last night, so based on what you said, obviously that didn't happen. So, I mean, I'm just a little concerned as well. As to where else we can save, I guess we'll have to look again. I'm not really sure. I mean, I know I did, Danielle. I don't know if anybody else can think of anything. I don't know where else we can make an adjustment at this point. So I do want to let the board know that we did work very hard. That is not typical to have another meeting in between. And I couldn't come up with any additional besides this, which was, I think, close to almost $500,000 if I'm not adding it up correctly, or a little under. So we really did work very hard to try to come up with additional adjustments. Thank you.
Yeah, this is about 412,000 or thereabouts. And I would agree, the finance subcommittee did really pour through the budget. And one of the follow-up recommendations was to look at the curriculum one more time. So I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Fletcher.
All right, do you have another question?
Yeah, last, and I just want to clarify too, like, there were public comments made on Saturday morning at a town council meeting regarding the finance subcommittee and what they approved versus insinuating that the whole board approved these things. And I just want to clarify that's not true. And there's also misinformation about our buy ahead program. So I just want to clarify that, like, on the board side, we don't have like this, that's not where we could find money. The buy ahead program isn't like an official program. I know Dr. Brummett sent in clarifying emails to board members, but I just want to make sure publicly people know that like these cuts are not adopted yet. They are considerations. And then we have like a buy ahead program, but I just want to clarify that for the public too, because I think others might think, oh, there's all that we're talking around in circles about, oh, let's get creative with all these cuts. That's not a place for a cut as well. It's not a program type of thing. So just, can you clarify that too? I just want to make sure that's clear.
Sure. Yeah, there's not a formal buy ahead program. And what we do is if there is money in the current year's budget that we can use to offset the next year's budget, thereby to reduce our ask, we've done it in the past. The board asked for an accounting of that, though typically we also discuss it when we present the board present the budget to the board. My apologies. And so this year there were no buy aheads. In previous years, we've provided board reports, and typically they are in supply items. You can't buy ahead like a service, but you can buy ahead some curricular items or some supplies. And that's typically where we've done it, sometimes technology. And we provided an accounting of the last several years of that. But this year, because our budget is quite tight and we don't want to rely any more than we have to on the non-lapsing monies, there were no buy aheads. So that, I wouldn't call it a program, I would call it an analysis that we try to do so that we can offset the following year's budget. But as the board has seen, when folks saw these dramatic upticks this year in certain curricular lines, they're like, whoa, what happened? And that caught the eye of our town officials as well. And that is typically a direct result of buy aheads, because if you buy ahead in the previous year, then the next year, your ask may be that much higher because you're more or less backfilling. So not a formalized program, not something we're able to do every year. It is a strategy to reduce the subsequent year's ask, but not a strategy that we can use for this coming year.
All right, well, thank you. Mr. Leverrier?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think that we could make a cut to our maintenance contracted services to 0%. I mean, we have very qualified and competent maintenance workers on our payroll. And I said this at last year's budget that, you know, we should be relying on our employees more rather than hiring out to third-party contractors. With the budget increase we received last year in that line, I mean, I think that a zero in that particular line item would be helpful to closing the gap. Thanks.
Anastasia, do you have another question or comment?
I do. I have a question for Lou. If that cut was made in regards to what Mr. Leverrier said, what would that bring us at tentatively? Like, what does that look like?
Can we talk about what that is first before
In-
we do that?
For the
I can't.
contract services?
Do you have your mic on?
Yes, I don't have my book with me at the moment, so I don't remember the exact.
I believe we covered it at the finance subcommittee. It is the contracted services.
599 account, right? I'm trying to think what the magnitude of the, oh, you got it?
Oh,
Yeah, okay,
very good.
great. So I just, say what it is. I believe it was calculated out at a 20% increase over the actual. If I remember the final amount, it was $1,011,470 was the request status right now. And I believe the total budget for that was 836,000.
For the contracted services
For
for
maintenance.
maintenance is $1,111,437 ask.
Right. And the appropriation right now is 836, I believe.
You are amazing
Am I right?
and might need to go out more
So-
and get those numbers out of your head.
So you're up 250,000, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
So if we
The,
reduce that, what would that bring it down to, our percentage increase?
about 0.3% if that went to zero of your budget ask. So, you know, if we're at
Can you,
5.4.
sorry, can you explain what that actually means though? Like,
Right.
we're talking about percents and jobs and things that happen, and we're not talking about the function of what we would be cutting. So
Right.
can you just also?
These
explain
are
that?
all specialty trades that are not on staff. We have the sprinkler companies that manage the fire suppression systems around all the buildings, whether it's the wet system for True Fire or the halon systems for the cafeterias that they have, stove grease fire or whatever it is, so they can address either one of those situations. You have the maintenance contract for the fire alarms in all the buildings. When you walk in, they have the big fire panel that the fire marshal or the fire chief and the gang roll in, and they have to assess what that panel is telling as far as where the fire, where's the trouble in the building. All those have to be constantly kept update. We have supplemental electrician services because our in-house electrician is a one-man gang of basically just working off of a ladder, working on small electrical projects. And he is much more aligned with being the brains behind being able to identify and keep the overall systems running. But he doesn't have the capacity, he doesn't have the tool set, he doesn't have the resources in order to switch out a transformer or an electrical panel or go change out the lights at the light towers at the football field. There's a number of these things we just don't have that are here. Other things that are in there are the plumbing services for the district. If you think 5,000 individuals a day going through 180 to 200 days of the flushes and the spigots and everything else in the sun. There's a lot of transactions that could, the doors that are there, being able to have door service by qualified door companies, the elevators and lifts that are in the buildings. There is probably 35 to 40 of these line item details that are here for specialties that are really beyond the skill set of our staff. And if you wanted to hire somebody who was a specialist in a certain area, you do not have enough work for a full-time position. So if we decided, okay, let's hire an electrician or a plumber, it'd probably be a 0.4, 0.5 job over the course of the year. And it'd be an ineffective hire because the person would be working in other, lower task skills, but you're paying for the high end of the work. So we have to balance what we can get done and what we have to go out for. And nothing is cheap out there right now. Everybody that we're hearing from is routinely plus 20% on their pricing, both on the labor side, and it's even worse on the materials, because in trying to get the repair parts that are needed. Right now we have a in-process repair for a rooftop system over the media center at John Wallace. One component of the system went bad. It was called a heat exchanger. That one part itself is $20,000, plus the cost for the company to come in, take it out, put a new one back in, and restore it to functional condition.
So Lou, the short answer is that this line item is for services that we personally we don't have the capacity.
Capacity to
But
do
I-
it.
So what about the supply side? I remember during the finance meeting, Lou, and I didn't want to interrupt you. I know you were speaking for a little bit, about you saying that we want to make sure we have the 5 items on the shelf, not 2. What about the supplies? Now, I don't have that book in front of me, but like Ms. Wagner, sorry, I was gonna say Ms. Mankey, said, like, if it comes down to cutting products versus people, I mean, we're gonna cut products. So I understand that it's hard, and these are hard times for everyone, but we need to figure that out, because we're not going to cut our teachers, and we're not going to cut the people that impact our children. And we want to make sure that they have the resources they need, especially after coming out of a pandemic. Some of the things that we always, fight and talk about were providing recovery for students who fell behind. So we're going to make sure we do that. So it may be a hard ask to cut some of the supplies. And of course, we're not going to leave kids in the dark or anything like that. We never have, but we have to make those tough decisions because, like I said, I didn't watch the meeting last night. I'm just going off of regurgitated information. But if we're not getting the even 5.95 or the tentative 5.43, any of that, then we have to ensure that we still keep our staff and still help these children and cut some of those supplies. Let's say we don't cut the contracted service workers. Well, we're going to have to cut some of the supplies and we're going to have to figure out how to do that and use our creative minds to do that. I know we did ask, and I know Jessica Weaver was an advocate as well. Thank you. And Beth Mankey about having a joint meeting with the town council and Board of Ed. And I think with what was, they said last night versus what we're asking for, I am going to advocate publicly that we have that meeting sooner than later, because I mean, what else can we do? Dr. Brummett was in the finance meeting with us, so was the mayor. There isn't anything else to tentatively cut. There's just not. So, I mean, we can keep digging and trying, but I mean, even to come up with almost, let me make sure I'm clear with my words, 500,000, almost tentatively come up with that. I mean, I thought that was huge because we didn't come up with that as a board before. So even just going through over and over, and I mean, we just have to figure something out. I mean, if maintenance or whatever it's called, the supply line can't buy 5 things on a shelf and have to buy 3, gonna have to figure it out. And if the town's gonna have to step in to help, we're gonna have to figure it out. We have to become creative and we're going to have to figure it out. But I'm going to advocate for Dr. Fletcher, Dr. Brummett, the mayor to come together, because even with that MOU, we're still not getting what we need. So we need to have that joint meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to speed this up here because we're going over things that we've already discussed at detail. I'll give you a moment here in just a moment. So we can't make cuts tonight. And we don't even know what we're going to get for a budget. So at this point, we're just going to have to go into a holding pattern. And then once we find out what our budget is approved at, then we're going to come back here and we'll work as the board to find the cuts. Okay, Ms. Strost, I'll give you one last thing on this.
Super quick. At the finance meeting, we had asked for a list of what current contracted services we use this year so that we could have that information. So I know that was not that long ago. I think it was less than a week ago. I know that's a big ask, but
Send it out a
we
few
did
days
send
ago.
it. I did. What's wrong with my board email? I'm not getting everything.
I can definitely resend it, but Lou had provided that to us, right?
I'm not on everything because Mr. Branda will say like, hey, I'm like, I'm not on that. So I
Okay,
don't know.
we will resend that, but
Thank you.
that was a request and we did collect it.
Okay, so at this point, we do have another item that we got to discuss and vote on. So I'm going to close the conversation on that at this point.
Okay.
And I'm sure I won't say what I'm going to say. Okay.
So, can I segue over to capital? Is that all
Yes,
right?
let's go over to the Capitol.
And this is a potential action item, one that the finance subcommittee did put forth in a quick review. We did a review of our capital budget before the finance subcommittee. We articulated that we are currently in the midst of spending our technology money. We anticipate that entire line item will be spent in full. The track resurfacing is a new concern. We thought we would try to look at repairs. Those are not feasible. And Lou did get more current estimates. That's about a $250,000 undertaking, upwards of potentially 300,000. That's in the planning stages. Why is that a priority now? Because 2 of our lanes are currently unusable due to safety hazards. I believe Lou referenced the HVAC system at Wallace that needed to be repaired and renovated. That's been completed. District vehicle that was completed back in the fall. That's a vehicle that we use to go from school to school. And the NHS North parking lot resurfacing, that's been on the docket for quite some time. And that's looking to be about a $240,000 to $280,000 undertaking. Because these items will exceed what we currently have, Lou cultivated a memo that was already shared with the finance subcommittee. And Lou, if you wouldn't mind just doing a very quick overview of what this memo is about.
Sure. Within the board CIP account, there is project allocations that are established by the town budget process each April. So when the facilities committee gets together and then brings a proposal to the board for consideration in December, the board is basically voting on, this is our proposed action plan for board CIP items for the next fiscal year from July through the succeeding June. When all the resources come into the fund, they are moved to the undesignated reserve line within the board CIP account. And for this year, we had $1.2 million of resources basically that were there. Our appropriations were only $1 million. So we did not fully appropriate the money that we had available on the undesignated line. As things have been unfolding this year, there's been a big increase in revenue receipts that we're going to have, and big increase in the cost of some of the project proposals. Right now, with the resources we have in the designated project accounts, we do not have enough money to do both of these projects. It would be one or the other. We would not be able to do both. We also have I believe it's $347,000 on the undesignated line that is available for reallocation, but that requires a town council action. The last time we made a proposal of this type was 2 years ago, when we had to take down the chimney at Martin Kellogg because it was structurally unstable. We did the same basic memo request to the town manager, town council, to put it on an agenda that we'd like to have the council authorize moving $300,000 this year off the non-designated line into the 2 project accounts that I've designated here in the memo. That will get us a long way toward the adequate level of funding to make these projects happen. If there is a little bit of a shortfall, we can always roll over into next year's appropriation for the finishing touches on this, if it's a little bit short. I just don't know exactly the dollars here. It's such a volatile market right now that I can't give you the 99% certain answer of where these are going to land. But we have the resources now to allocate to the projects. This way we can move ahead in good conscience and get them ready. We can always pull back and say, no, we won't. It's too expensive. We'll wait for something to come down in price, or we've got to readdress how we're going to do this. So, we will not get ourselves in a position where the commitment the board's making pass this motion means it's full speed ahead under any conditions. They'll be prudently reviewed and determined if it's the right course of action at this point. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Strauss.
I know that I was at the finance committee, but I process slow sometimes. So the repaving of the high school north parking lot definitely needs to be done. Is that something that, does the town repave? In the town, is that price for the town doing it?
The town will do it unless they're overloaded, and then they'll sub it out to Tilcon to do the work. But we will be paying for it. So either we pay the town to do that work, or we'll be paying Tilcon, or the board CIP fund will be paying it. One way or another, the town will control the project on our behalf because they have the technical expertise to get everything done the way we need it. Okay, what I'd like to do is get a motion on this, then we can have our discussion on it.
Move that the Newington Board of Education requests that the Newington Town Council authorize the transfer of $300,000 of financial resources currently in the undesignated reserve line item within the board CIP fund and transfer the $300,000 to the following accounts: blacktop/paving account 31193-88758 in the amount of $200,000, and track/tennis/basketball services in the account 31193-88252 in the amount of $100,000.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. It's now open for discussion. Michelle?
Hi, yes. I do want to make note of something. I was gonna ask the same thing as Ms. Strohs in regards to maybe the town helping us out or doing that for us. I know the high school track has been on there since I joined the board as something that needed to be worked on since 2021, so it's not something that's new. This came up for discussion before. We did the John Patterson parking lot, and I think with inflation, we ended up having to do, Patterson, which looks amazing, by the way. But I was just wondering if there's any way, Lou, that the town can help us, seeing that the track has been on the list to get done for like almost 2 years now.
We would have to bring that request to the next meeting, see if there is any resources that they'd be willing to dedicate to it. The only real concern would be if becomes just a substitution. Well, we certainly don't have a problem with you doing the track, but something else comes out. So you end up having to reorder your priorities. So unless we, have some indication that the town will expand the resources they would provide for us financially, we should expect that we'll be limited by what we have access to. And it's just a matter of reordering our own priorities.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Michael Miranda,
Yes.
Danielle Droz.
Yes.
Dr. Bruce Fletcher,
Yes.
Beth Mackey Wagner,
Yes.
Richard LeVerrier,
Yes.
Amy Parati,
Yes.
Jessica Weaver,
Yes.
Anastasia Yap.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously 8-0.
All right, thank you very much. I'm now moving us on to our agenda item G, which is public participation on any matter related to board responsibilities. You can call in at 860-665-8659, or you can raise your hand here in the meeting and we will call on you. We do limit civil participation to 3 minutes. Ms. Havens?
Hi, sorry for the delay. Dana Havens, 113 Stoddard. Somebody keeps texting me, stop it. Okay, if you are truly, I was listening to some of the public participation earlier, so this is in regards to that. But if you guys are truly committed to equity and diversity, it means that you must respect the expression and conviction of all views. The fact that a father's conservative beliefs and his son following suit were mentioned in a writing by a principal, or what I heard from a parent was written in another email, who wants to, who she's concerned about controlling the flow and the timing of the cruelties and sexual actions of others, and the dangers of the world to her child. And the wording that was sent to her was really quite unaccepting. And those are just a couple of instances that I know of. There's a couple more, and I'm sure there are even more parents who feel like this, but just don't have the courage to speak up. I believe that what was said earlier today, these two examples I gave you, are proof that your NPS staff are not only practicing inclusion and equity when it comes to these types of beliefs. It appears they are only tolerant of those who think along the same views or the views you are directing them to adopt. And sadly, it seems that some of the children are following suit. I think you need to revisit your mission statement and the practice surrounding these issues, and truly encourage encourage your staff and children to be tolerant of other people's beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item H, which is further remarks by board members. Remind you, we don't make remarks on public comments.
And yeah, that's the first thing that I have on my list. So I know that we don't respond to the public, but I do think that when parents come and I still think we need to revisit that. I think that they deserve kind of a roundtable discussion, not with a response because that's not our purview, but just, I think they deserve to know how we feel because they elected us. So, I am going to reiterate that I hope that we make sure that we include all cultures. I think it's important. I've said that. It's not my first time saying it. I think that our work with equity is amazing in this town. I've always said that, but I want to make sure that we are equitable for all. And I know that that's what our vision is, and that's what that amazing woman, who I don't remember her name, but her first name was Yvonne, said. Like, so I just want to make sure that we're continuing to walk that walk. I want to also just state, like, closing the achievement gap is not anything new. And I know that some people think it is. It's not. I mean, much before you went to college, my friend, Chef versus O'Neill had actually come into fruition while I was in teaching school, and it was amazing. And it was about that achievement gap. And then Race to the Top was also about that. Like, so that's not a new concept, and we have to address it. And then fourth, it had been brought to my attention about adding a new policy about buy ahead, and it's not a policy, but I do wonder if, and I asked for clarification and didn't get it, but, and it wasn't from you that I asked for clarification, but, if we're talking about looking at a policy for budget transfers, because I think that's really what the concern is. So I'm just looking for clarification on, like, what, as a board, it's not in our purview to say, like, don't do buy aheads, but is it the question about the board budget transfers that are done with beforehand? So I'm sorry that I took so long because I know it's late, but I cried tonight, so it's okay. Thank you all. Oh, and Mr. Branda, I like you too.
Mr. Leverrier?
Yes, thank you. Just a few things. I'll try to go quickly. First, if there is, certain non-inclusion of students and bullying going on that's related to that, it has to stop, and it's going to stop. Secondly, I want to say quickly that multiple members of this board, including myself and members of both parties, have gone on the record during meetings seeking to have a joint meeting with the town council, and the mayor herself came in and requested that meeting through the appropriate procedural channels during public participation. It's time for us to do that. And lastly, I would be remiss if, I didn't make a comment regarding the school shooting that happened in Nashville. I've been personally critical of the equity goals. I have gone on record several times saying that I think that equality should be the focus and not equity. But since we do have an equity goal, and I'm looking through it through a lens of equity, we need to make sure that we are looking at how we are accommodating and making sure that students with mental disabilities are receiving the help and support that they need on a daily basis. And we need to make sure that we are including them into our portrait of a graduate so that they are well-functioning members of society upon graduation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize for my tardiness today. I was at the Martin Kellogg performance of Beauty and the Beast. My daughter was in the cast tonight. There's 4 more shows, I believe, Thursday, Friday, and 2 on Saturday. So if you have not seen it yet, I encourage you to do so. The tickets are selling very fast, might sell out. It was amazing. I heard last night was amazing too, Dr. Brown, and everybody. I also just want to put in a plug for our state reps and Rep Curry, who visited John Wallace today, kind of along the lines of what Richard is saying, another school shooting. always comes up. Security issues, obviously don't want to get into details, but our reps and Rep Curry saw John Wallace, the wings that are in need of renovation. I know that the town council is aware. Mayor Beth said last night that she would schedule a meeting with Dr. Brummett and head of security to go through the plans and what the board is asking for. I know it was cut from the CIP budget, but I'm hoping that the town can find a way to work with Dr. Brummett, her team, the board to make it work, because I think it is extremely important, especially this day and age, to just be safe. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Weaver?
I think Amy took exactly my line. I think one of those things I immediately thought of the, obviously the victims and the families, but also just you go to your place where you know that there needs to be improvements, and Wallace has been a long-standing thing since I was a student. I think since Beth was a student, like it's been a conversation topic for a while about safety measures. So, I really hope that we can come to a solution this year, this budget year on this. I think just making sure more people are aware that is a huge priority, not only on the board, but hopefully we can get the town to see as well. And I just wanted to echo the sentence about Beauty and the Beast. We had a wonderful narrator and a enchantress sitting here right now, Dr. Brummett. I just really want to say it's such a great reflection of our school system. I think we all are huge fans of the arts here, and Newington has just been a shining example of that. But to have the teachers come and do a full teacher cast, it's just such an incredible thing to watch your middle school principal get up there and get your old middle school math teacher to sing as guest on. So I just think one of the things that we try and do, I know there's a lot of always craziness around all of our budget things, but I think it's a good time to highlight, these are the things that the programs are going to. This is what our budget really goes to. And thank you to all the teachers who not only put in full days of work, but then full nights of rehearsals and have incredible talent outside of the academics. So thank you for being holistic examples as well. And catch them tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, MKMS. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yap?
Hi, yes. I just want to echo some of the things that my other board members have said. As you all know, I've been an advocate to redoing, John Wallace and making sure it's safe and secure. I know I bounced ideas off many board members, town council members, just other people, speaking with Dr. Brummett, just how we can get that project done. I know we're working as hard as we can to figure out ways that we can at least start the process. I know, Lou, thank you very much. You did send me an update in regards to ways that the town can possibly start the project. And thank you for doing all that research and coming up with different creative ways to possibly, just make the school safer. I was, so upset after hearing about that shooting, and it's just disgusting, and it's sad, and that people lose their lives, and I think that safety is a priority, and I will always advocate for that. I'm a mother myself, I have family members, and you all do as well, and I will advocate to the town council, to everyone that will listen to me, on the top of my voice, that is something that we need to get done soon. And if there's any way that the town can help us out with that, or come up with some type of strategic planning, I think John Wallace is a priority. Thank you.
Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. Just wanted to say ditto, I guess, really to most of what was said, but I did want to mention or kind of reflect back on Danielle's comment, also our presenters this evening that talked about the equity survey, really looking at equity being not only through the lens of race, and truly looking at all of our subgroups and making sure that everyone feels included, all needs are met, and that everybody is able to, hit that target, being given what they need in order to succeed. And again, going back to what Mr. Leverrier said, I think mental health I know mental health of our students has taken a serious hit post-pandemic. And I know that our schools and our teachers are doing a lot to support and to help and to advocate for And I just think that is definitely a group of students that need everything they can, to kind of push forward. And there was something else I was gonna say. Oh, my gosh. I was going to say that I went to the high school show, I think it was 2 weeks ago now. It was absolutely spectacular. Laughed so hard that I cried. Your son was amazing. Everybody in it was just really outstanding. It was also so cool to see, and I think the same with Martin Kellogg shows as well. It's not just the kiddos on stage, right? They're handing out programs, they're backstage, they're doing hair and makeup, they're building the props. It just it highlights the school as a whole community. Everyone is involved. All of the teachers are on stage, or they're sitting in the audience, or they're helping backstage or selling tickets, and all of the parents are coming out. And it's just this really, really beautiful community example that I think should be highlighted and celebrated.
I'll try to be fast, but I'm a little fired up tonight. Okay, really quick on the budget. Just, I have a hard time when we talk about all of the creativity that we are doing at this table and virtually, and then we don't hear creativity on the town side, and then we see a projected unreserved bank account of over $13 million that the town will have after all is said and done, when we're needing what we need to fund a school district. And I think it's very unrealistic to assume that, you know, Beth made the point about the library books, right? At some point, we're going to need to fund those. So even if we don't fund them now, next year they're going to be in the budget. So this town continuously just finds the biggest can that we can kick, and we kick it down the road until we're at the point that we're at right now. And I think at some point, we have to just figure out what, as a town, we value here. And it seems consistently that the school district is looked at as, you go make it work, you go tell so-and-so that we have too much staff here, but on the town side, we're not going to do any of that. And I just think I think that the way the school system is treated at town government is unfair. And I'm just going to say it. I think the way that this budget was handed down to us from its initial release was very unfair. I don't think that either Dr. Brummett nor Dr. Fletcher have been avoiding any sort of joint meeting. I think it's been out there plenty of times. I don't think there's interest on the town side to do it. So I'm just going to throw that out there. There's money. I'm not saying that I think it's a great strategy to spend your savings account, but the town does it anyway, and they do it to offset the mill rate. I'm just saying maybe we should look at what the reality is of the school system's budget this year and next year, because we're just going to have the same conversation again in a year. I just wanted to, Dr. Fletcher, if you give me a second here. On social media, we had a parent come here a few weeks ago, and coincidentally, the same person was here recording another parent. And I just want to say, I don't want to minimize the parent's concern. I think Danielle put it very well, that like, we have to have these conversations, and there's always going to be gaps. I think Dr. Brummett mentioned too during the equity conversation, there's always going to be gaps. There's always going to be room for improvement, conversations that we have to have, really tough ones at times. But I think exploiting a parent's complaint is a really dangerous thing to do, not only just for the school system, but for this town. So the reason I say that is, a few weeks ago, we all saw the parent that was here, and it was posted on social media. And the parent said, and I quote, "Due to an innocuous political cartoon I posted on Facebook, we had to endure a SWAT-like raid in our home last Thursday when SRO Corvo's brother stated it was an emergency situation and I had to come outside. I would not go outside for fear of my life." Now, earlier, a week ago, just a week ago, that same parent said this. I have to make a correction. Corvo, the security guard at Martin Kellogg, his brother is a Newington police officer, but was not, and in parentheses, as I was told by a Board of Education member, involved in the raid in my home. The only person that's not at this meeting right now is Sam Sharma. I'm very confident Sam Sharma did not have this interaction. So if nobody on the Board of Education is willing to apologize to Mr. Corvo, the Newington Police Department, well, both of the Mr. Corvos actually, then I think that's shameful. And I think the Board of Education should then just apologize on behalf of whoever doesn't have the willingness to step forward and say that they told this parent this. And in the thread, it's very clear. The parent says that it was just two adults talking, they're allowed to talk, and that the Board of Education member may have just been confused, which is interesting. I don't know why a Board of Education member would even be involved in that conversation. But we talk about coincidences. I think that the person that was here recording, I think that it's very interesting that they recorded this initial conversation that was on social media. I'm going to expect that today's public participation will also be on social media. And I think that's very unfair to Mr. Diaz. I think it's very unfair to Mr. Torello, who are doing everything they can in that school. It doesn't minimize the parents' complaint, concern in any way, but they're not going to be on social media to defend themselves. Mr. Torello, Mr. Diaz, the teachers in that building are not logging on to Newington Strong to say, here are the facts. And I think whoever is out there trying to tell this person to record this stuff and post on social media under the assumption that everything is going wrong at Newington Public Schools should be ashamed of themselves. Thank you.
Right.
Just to clarify. Just two clarifying pieces for the record. One is that late today after the visit by our legislators, I don't know if there's any coincidence there, we were contacted by the town manager's office to have a meeting about John Wallace. So they've requested that we just send members of our choosing who can speak to the particulars of the program. So that is happening. I believe it's going to be Tuesday after the town council meeting. Relative to the mayor, we've had conversations. I don't recall her coming here to ask for a joint meeting. That part I just don't recall. But I believe in our conversations, if anything were to occur, it indicated it would not be like a full joint meeting because those typically don't go as well. But she seemed to be open to a small group. Now that's where we left it. I don't know whether it'll go further than that, but I don't recall her requesting it at a board meeting. However, in private conversation, there may be some potential there, but I think it would be a small group versus two bodies getting together. So I just want to clear the record on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You just swooped in. You did
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. See you next Wednesday.
good.